This episode of the GC Sunscast is brought to you by our Patreon donors, Old Soul, Jack's Dad, Tom Bosty, James Wood, and Paul Bosty, James Wood, and Tom Kim. If you'd like to help us, jump over to patreon.com/GC Sunscast and donate to the show. Otherwise, jump on board our Facebook and YouTube channels, click like and subscribe to share the show with your friends and family. But for now, let's get on to the show. Hello and welcome to the GC Sunscast. I am Shane, your host, and joining me, as he does each and every week, the number one Suns fan with a mouth, Tom. How are you?
Number one fan, I don't know. I think they gave it to someone else, didn't they? I'm very good. How about you, Shane?
Yeah, I'm great. It's been a busy week. We've got some new tech once again for the podcast, a couple of extra cables, which will start to allow us to bring in a potential Skype caller or an extra guest. We're just waiting for those donations to kick in to get to that stage, and pretty soon we're hoping to be able to allow our Patreon donors to call into the show and have a chat. But for now, let's stick to the Suns news. We've got a lot to get through today. It is season beginning. We've got round one just ahead of us. So let's get into it. We've got a bit of news happening off the field. So let's start with the signing of Sam Fletcher. That's probably the biggest news coming out of the week. What can you tell me about Sam Fletcher, Tom?
Yeah, I agree. He's a great little signing. Sammy Fletcher comes from the Dandenong Stingrays, who some listeners will know they won the TAC Under-18s Cup. They were the best team all year, and he was named in the best players all year. He's come through the system with Rankin and Lukosius and the King boys and all those top players, and just a couple of little red flags came up in his draft year, and he just slid right out of the draft altogether. And the red flags were really nothing except for, injury. Injury and probably hit the position he plays. So he's a midfielder. He's got a bit of size for a midfielder. He's a lot bigger actually than a lot of the guys who were picked ahead of him. And perhaps he's just going to be one of those guys who's 20 or 21 before he really starts to hit AFL level. So I wouldn't have had a problem with him if we took him in the second round.
Yeah, he's got potential. That 19-year-old inside mid. He's a tall bloke, 187 centimetres, and his stats say 79 kilos, but who knows when that was taken, probably during his profiling for the draft last year.
Exactly.
Now, so do you think he'll play? There seems to be a lot of people in front of him. And it's real question marks on whether he plays. I mean, the big talking point in the last couple of weeks has been Will Brody, and he's a similar player, and he can't even get a game.
Yep, and I think the lesson learned is that the players in that profile take a few years to come on. We can't all be Lockie Weller or Touk Miller. You've got players like Will Brody, and before him, Braden Fiorini. I mean, he was very good, but injury and form and whatnot meant that it's really now that we're seeing the best of Fiorini as an inside mid, and there's only a little limited amount of spaces, as you say. So to answer your question directly, yes, I do think Sam Fletcher will play. Unfortunately, it's going to mean that we're trying new things, so it's going to be late in the year. If he can have a great little crack at the NEFL and play, 10 or 12 really great NEFL games, he'll find himself, just like Heron and Dawson last year, he'll find himself getting picked. But if he just has a bad year, he might be just one and done. This is the new the new dichotomy in the AFL is we've got these players who can be taken after the draft, and at the end of October they can be delisted straight away. There's nothing stopping him, but he'll be a Sun until October.
Well, he is on the senior list, isn't he? So we just don't know how long his contract is, whether it is only the 1 year or 2 years like normal draftees.
Yeah. It'll be a year with this new rule. So, I mean, we could sign 2 more guys to the senior list because Wigg and Thompson are on the long term injured list. We've got 47 guys at the moment. 45. Two are injured, so we can replace them. But we've also got 2 rookie spots left open. So there's a bit of a grey area around that. Can we bring in academy guys who were eligible for the draft last year? So could we bring in, if we need a ruckman, can we bring in Conroy because he's already been through the draft? Matt Conroy is an under-19s Gold Coast Suns academy player. My boy Dirk Conan, same deal. There are a couple of spots on the rookie list that I believe that they could come in. I don't know if it's at any time or if with the new rules it has to be in the mid-season time. So I don't think we will because it's going to cost like over $100,000 for each player that we add on to the supplemental list. But we can do it. We've got a lot more wriggle room than any other club in that regard, let's face it.
Yeah, we've got a lot of flexibility at the moment, so that's good. All right, the other big player news was actually the introduction of a new son by the way of Jack Leslie. So an actual son, not the son, a son. We think it's a son, don't we? We don't know yet, do we?
If he has a girl, she could play for the Suns women's team, but he's not eligible yet for that. But you never know with Jack Leslie. I reckon he's good. First of all, congratulations and good on him. And wasn't the video great?
Yeah, absolutely. Good to see the boys get around them. Jack Leslie's only played 28 games, so for father-son eligibility, he'd have to play another 72. Is it the same rules for the women's, or is it 50 games? Just one.
You could be a one-game wonder, and your daughter plays for that club.
Okay, so I guess at this
there
stage
are a lot more of those than you'd even imagine.
I guess at this stage we're hoping for a daughter.
Well, we need to populate the women's list, but at this stage it's going to be about 12 years before any father-son or father-daughter and the mother-daughter. Well, I don't know. Maybe we can recruit a son's women's player who's already got a teenage daughter or something. And we don't know yet whether there'll be a mother-son rule because that's certainly a long way from any club needing to apply that. So whatever that is, maybe it's you play 20 games and your son's eligible. Who knows? But the father-son rule is very old, so they're only going to expand it. That's the good news. And we'll eventually have Gary Ablett III will be eligible for us. But the first one will be the man we haven't spoken about this year is Michael Riccitelli. His son will be the first eligible father-son for the Suns, but that's another 12 years away.
Well, let's stay focused on the here and now.
Sure.
Last week, it was Captain's Day in the AFL as part of their season launch, and Jared Witts represented the Suns as the captain. So not much happens there. They get a photo taken, answer a couple of questionnaires about who their predictions are. But one interesting question was asked of Witts, and that was, what will you do as a captain better than the last captains? So I loved Witts' response here. His response was, that's easy. I plan to stay on the Gold Coast and see out my contract. And
why not?
In a way, he's having a jab at every single previous Gold Coast captain, isn't he? So,
well, there's only been 3 of them, but all 3 of them left in similar circumstances. Technically, Lynch wasn't breaking his contract, but he was still restricted in free agency. So each of them there was a contractual issue with each of them that they didn't stick around for that final year. So yeah, he's well entitled. They've got targets on their backs. And one of them won't even be playing this weekend. Maybe both of them won't be playing this weekend.
All right. Well, that's it for what I would call news. Now, the rest of the stuff we're going to cover coming up is probably more media highlights. With the season starting, a lot of Suns players and coaching staff were exposed to the media for articles, interviews, you name it. So a couple of the ones we're going to touch on. Miles was interviewed for the Gold Coast Bulletin, and he's basically just saying the club is in a good place. He loves being there. He still wants to play finals and believes the club's on the right track. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, he was really eloquent, and Tom Boswell's doing a great job. It's kind of, I feel like there's a Gold Coast Bulletin journalist who is also a fan of the team, and even if he isn't, he writes like he is, or he's writing for the fans. So that's really good.
Also, AFL 360, Fox Sports, KO Sports, they've been doing a lot of work, obviously. But off those media, we've got Cochrane was on AFL 360. He gave a very passionate plea to supporters. He stood up for us and just showed his passion for the club. So that was really great to see.
Absolutely, and you can tell that he's respected in Melbourne, and those two journalists, on AFL 360, they're well respected themselves. So I really like the tone of it all. There is still a little bit of that kind of, what are you doing up there, and everything's gone to hell. But Cochrane wouldn't have a bar of it and just said, no, we're actually doing better than we ever have, and we're only going to get better. And you got to have that attitude. I mean, the Melbourne media want to, they can't wait for us to lose a few games, and they're still talking about whether we're going to win one at all. And then Cochrane goes on there and says it how it actually is, how we know it to be. And, yeah, I think it's great.
It's great, but they still don't listen. I mean, it being the start of the season, the podcasts and all the content's flowing, and let's face it, a lot of that stuff is written by Victorians, Melbourne media people, and they've got no clue. They half of them probably wouldn't know the Suns players if they saw them on the street. Now,
well, it was actually in something I was reading saying how people will need to bone up on Suns players' names before they watch them. But it's like, who needs to? You know what I mean? Like, if people have been paying attention, they'll know who's gone and who's come in. It's more the fact that they never really know more than half a dozen of the players anyway. And if they've got dark skin, they're all Jack Martin.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I actually had one of the brothers of one of the Suns players reach out to me in the last week, just saying hi, thanking us for the work we do on the show. And their big gripe was the Victorian media. It's just they don't really know what they're talking about when it comes to the Suns. And when they're calling games, quite often they don't know who's got the ball half the time. So,
exactly.
I mean, we're trying to bring that sort of element to the media landscape from an amateur point of view. But, it's just good to have some Suns fans talking footy, and we hope everyone else out there is enjoying it as much as we are talking about it. Let's move on. We've got Stewart Dew was also in a bunch of interviews on AFL Fox Footy. It was Coaches Uncovered. You can also see it on KO Sports. And the Gold Coast Suns football media department has actually been really good in putting it all up on the Suns website if you don't have access to those things.
So, they have, and it plays in a bit of a loop too, so you kind of... You tune in to watch one thing and you end up watching all five. It's actually quite good.
Well, just on that, I've been so impressed with the Suns media department this year. They have done far better than any of their predecessors have, just in getting content out there to us. I mean, it would have been near impossible in the past to have interviews done on other networks, broadcast through a club website. You know, that wouldn't have happened in the past, but now you could even go on there and watch the Cochrane interview on AFL 360 via our club website. So that's just great to see. Really good engagement with the fans. In that as well, there was a retention interview with John Haynes on one of the radio stations. Did you take anything out of that one, Tom?
I mean, there's none of these interviews have any great revelations or you know, nothing's really coming out that's suddenly making us all go, oh my God, I completely overlooked that. But at the same time, it's just this really positive message that's coming out. And, you know, you look at a guy like Stewart Dew and there's a lot of layers to him. He's a pretty deep individual, and I think he's really honest about the journey that it's taking. And I guess if I go back to a previous interview that he did where he said that he was virtually gift-wrapped the job at the Demons and he didn't take it because he didn't want to just be sort of taking over from Roosie and just, you know, getting all the accolades for not really having any part of building a club from the bottom up. And even though he wasn't here for the first 7 seasons or the you know, before the inaugural year season, he has, in a sense, torn everything down player-wise, and he's building it all back from the ground up. And a lot of players who a year ago, you would have said, oh, we can't survive without those guys. We're now happy to see the back end of them because they don't fit Dew's plan. So that's what these interviews just keep reinforcing that he's got an idea of where he wants to be in a couple of years, and I reckon he'll get there.
Yeah, it's really good signs coming out from the club, everything we've seen this off-season. All right, well, the only other news that I've got here is the number 1 ticket holders were announced, Jill Matheson and Bruce Colson. Nothing... I mean, the only surprising news I thought was it wasn't some sort of a well-known celebrity or media personality. But in fairness, these two people are ambassadors off the Gold Coast. They work well behind the scenes, supporting the club as supporters and as business people. And the season launch, the first ever Gold Coast season launch, was held at Hoda on Friday night.
Yeah, well, we were invited, but, you know, couldn't make it for various reasons, of course.
Invited? You mean we couldn't cough up the couple $100 they were asking?
Yeah. No, perhaps that'll be on the wish list for future season openings. But, look, I think the Gold Coast is the kind of place that doesn't mind a red carpet, doesn't mind the odd event. So you got to give the fans what they want. Looking at a few sort of things that are written by fans, that there's still a bit of a ways to go before the club actually feels like a real AFL club, in as much as the memberships don't give quite as good a value for money or any of this kind of stuff. But I think they're doing better every year, and this is just one of the things that some people love to go along to. I didn't even give it a second thought. I don't even have a date to take. So if we do get tickets next year, you could take your wife. How about that?
I don't think she'd be interested in that sort of stuff. Mind you, she did actually ask to accompany me to the game versus Fremantle next week. So I'm not sure how I feel about that, but if she's up for it, I'm up for it. All right, yeah. Let's move on. That covers all the media and news that we've had for the week. So now let's start turning our attentions towards Sunday. Gold Coast play St Kilda at Marvel Stadium. I believe it's at... I'm going to take a guess at 1 o'clock, but I don't have the numbers in front of me. Do you, Tom?
No, but this time of the year they like to play the game with the roof open, and they like to get everyone in and out by sort of 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. So the sun comes blaring in. And it's not all that hot because it's Melbourne, but yeah, they unless it's raining, it will be a sunny game at Marvel Stadium. I'm just spewing that we don't have superhero costumes to wear. They did it in the rugby league.
Yeah. I mean, Who matches the Suns' colours? I would probably think an Ironman sort of outfit would do.
Yeah. Well, considering that a Gold Coast Ironman would be a lifesaver, I think we could probably be the Ironmen for a day. The doggies are going to do it. They're going full blast.
Yep. Well, besides Guernseys and jumpers, what do you think is going to happen? Actually, I've got the numbers here. It's 1 o'clock Victorian time and 12 o'clock if you're up in Queensland. So, our predictions, well, not our predictions. While we're on the topic of predictions, I'll just put the call out to any of our live listeners. Jump on the chat and give us your predictions for leading goal scorer for the Suns, best and fairest winner for the Suns, where you think the Suns will finish on the ladder, and also who you think the best recruit for the Suns will be for the year. Let us know what your thoughts are on the chat, and we'll try and get to them by the end of the show when we do ours as well. But for now, yes, let's get back to the St Kilda game. Now, last time the Suns met the Saints, it was up here at Metricon Stadium. Now, St Kilda defeated Gold Coast 80-78. That was that game where Gold Coast were about 5 or 6 goals up at about three-quarter time, and St Kilda just came home with the flood, and Gold Coast were just off their legs. Now, everyone's talking St Kilda up in this game. All the Victorians, everyone that's not a Sun supporter basically believes this is a Saints game to lose. But did you know the players missing for the Suns since that game is Lynch, Lyons, Leslie, Young, Lemons and Thompson? Now, the players missing for the Saints at this stage is Brown, Carlisle, Longer, Mav Weller, Paddy McCartan, and at this stage we believe Jack Stephen is touch and go. So we're missing 6 players each at this stage, and I'd argue that the players the Suns are missing aren't as important as the players the Saints are missing. And then on top of that, the players the Saints have brought in, Hanbury and King and Bytel, aren't going to be available. And one of their key defenders, Robertson, who didn't play against us last year, is also not going to be available. So it's looking pretty good on the paper for the Suns. What do you think, Tom?
Oh, yeah. Look, we have replaced all of those players. I mean, some of them are still on our list, obviously, but we've replaced the players that have left the club. And you could argue they're not as good. But, gee, you know, the fan voted side that we've got, and the sort of little twinges that we'll make there, bring put a couple of shift a few things around or whatever. No matter what you do, the top 22 for the Suns would smash any top 22 that the Suns had last year. It's far more versatile. Players can shift around. All of the younger guys from last year are older and more experienced now, and all of the injured guys from last year are back. So, you know, we didn't have Darcy McPherson in that team. We had a whole bunch of players out for various reasons. This is chalk and cheese. St Kilda are on their knees, and the Suns are up and rolling with probably only really Thompson's the only guy who's a big loss. He can be adequately replaced, and considering their full forward who he'd mark up on isn't going to play, well, you know, that's squared away. You know, Aaron Young, yes, that is a loss. He's an experienced player, but we can replace him. So, yeah, we're going to be better. Well, and they're going to be much worse.
I mean, we lose Lynch, but we get Lukosius. Probably, you know, a couple of years off the pace, but Lukosius looks every bit the player, even in his first year. We lose Lyons, but we've got Miles coming in, very like-for-like player. We lose Leslie. We're going to have Collins in. Argue that's an upgrade. We lose Young. Yeah, I think you could pick a name. You know, George Hall-Smith, Murdoch, either one. You know, they're both experienced players that can get in and get the ball. We lose Lemons. We're going to get McPherson in. And you lose Thompson, you've got Homsch coming in. Not to mention all the other experienced players the Suns have picked up in the off-season. I think we're going to be all the better for it. And all the training we've done I just think the issues that dogged us in that game against St Kilda at Metricon last year aren't going to be as big of an issue now. And despite it being played in Melbourne, I reckon the Suns are a good chance at going five goals up.
Yeah. And I think another thing you got to remember about early in the season down in Melbourne, they've still got a hangover. Like the Grand Prix's just finished, and there's a whole bunch of footy on. There's Thursday night, the footy starts. And it doesn't stop. I no doubt the Saints will have a reasonable crowd, but I can't imagine any of their supporters are really thinking that this is going to be a good year for them. They've just had such bad news in the pre-season, and they never. I won't go into the politics of it because we'll be here all night. But St Kilda just never seem to have a good pre-season, and even though there are some St Kilda tragics in the Melbourne media who reckon they're going to beat the Suns, I don't give them a chance in hell. They don't even have a ruckman, Shane. They got a 4-gamer going up against Jared Witts, who Jared Witts has posted last year in the top 10 results in various things like hit-outs and things like that. Top 10 of all time. Like those guys who are running around with him, who are playing 85% of the game and getting 60-plus hit-outs, they're just machines. And there's nothing that St Kilda can do to stop that.
The only part of the ground I'm worried that St Kilda would beat Gold Coast in, and that's going to be the midfield. The ruck domination, I think the Suns have that. I think our forwards are going to be better against their weakened defence, and I think our defence would stand up against their forwards who, there's no Buddy Franklin there, there's no game breaker there. It's really the midfield which is of the greatest concern, especially if they get Jack Stevens back. Then add that to Seb Ross, Jack Steele, Jack Nunes, Jack Billings, all the Jacks. Versus our midfield of Martin, Miles, Fiorini, Swallow. Who else runs through there? Well,
there's Jack, and maybe Jack will come in. We've got a few Jacks, don't worry. We've got Jack Martin, Jack Bowes, Jack Hompsch.
We've
Jack
actually,
Lukosius, we could even out-Jack them.
We've actually joked off air about this before, about actually trying to set up our own commentary of a game sometime. This would have been the perfect game. It would just be us saying, Jack kicks it to Jack, and Jack takes a mark, Jack goes on, Jack kicks a goal, and our listeners would just be dumbfounded. They wouldn't know what the hell's going on. Okay.
Yeah. Well, then there's Jez, Jacob, Jake and Jesse and Jared and Jordan. So,
all right. Well, let's look at who we think is going to be best 22 for the Suns this week. We did a fan-voted Suns cast, fan-voted best 22 throughout the last 6 weeks, and this is what we've come up with. We'll start in defence. We have Harbrow, Collins and Joyce on the back line, Hanley, Hompsch and Murdoch on half-back, Weller, Miller and Bowes in the mids, Martin, Day and Sexton on the half-forward flank, and McPherson, Wright, Ainsworth in the forwards. Add to Witts, Miles and Swallows as the followers, and Ballard, Burgess, Archie and Fiorini as our interchange. So that's quite a good side, but we already know that's not going to be the side that runs out, because we had word today from Stewart Crameri that Jack Lukosius is pretty much guaranteed to play. So he's not in that side. Do you reckon he takes out Day's position at centre-half forward?
Well, we also had the guarantee that Chris Burgess would play. So there's two guys who are coming in for sure. I don't know what it is about round one. The coaches like to drop a couple of things early and maybe take the pressure off. And so we know these guys are going to be in. So basically the answer is they both, the inclusion of Lukosius and Burgess means that Day is not going to play. So I don't know how close Day would be to that 22. I would dare say he's in the 26, but 26 maybe he flies down as the 23rd man, because if any big big player goes down, Day can just slot in. They can move him around a bit. So, don't know. If Day's not in there, who chops out in the ruck?
Well, yeah, you'd think Peter Wright is the only option there. I'm concerned about Day. I thought he would be up, ready to go for this season. And besides, I don't even think he played JLT 1, did he? I think he did, yeah. But
no. He did. He hasn't played any JLT.
Yeah, so he hasn't had any JLT games. And I'm not aware of an injury to him. So that's interesting. The other injury news, we've actually had an injury report come out this Arvo that we haven't mentioned yet. It looks like a lot of the Suns players are on their way back. We've had George Holland-Smith and Murdoch cleared to available for selection this week after minor knocks a couple of weeks ago. And we've had good news on Holman and... Help me out, Tom.
Corey Ellis,
that's right, as being available for selection, but they probably need to do some game practice, get that muscle into their body. And Jack Leslie's only a week away, it seems. There's also another player.
Well, I can help you out here, Shane. So they're not going to quite be ready for round one, and you wouldn't expect them to be in calculation anyway. But basically, Josh Corbett, Aaron Young and Jack Leslie are looking like coming back next week, will be available for selection, which pretty much just means that but by round 3, they'll either be playing AFL or playing NEFL. NEFL starts in round 3. There is a practice game this weekend. Leslie, Young, Corbett will not be playing in the practice game, but Corey Ellis will be, and anyone who doesn't get selected in that 22 plus the non-playing travelling emergency, because it is an away game, so there'll be 23 guys. There'll be 39 players, so 16 players left out, which is pretty healthy at this stage of the year. But within the next 5 weeks, we've got 5 players returning. Schoenfeld returns in a few weeks. Lemons the week after that, and even Rankin could be back by around 5. So, that's 45 players that'll be fit. There's only 2 guys who are out for the season, so it's actually a pretty healthy looking injury list.
Yeah, it's not as bad or as doom and gloom as we all thought last week. I think we were just all a bit down on the sad news of Rory Thompson.
That's right, yeah.
But yeah, things are looking up. Our recruits seem like they're all ready to go. It looks like we're going to have as many as 7 new recruits into the side, new Suns. So that's going to be interesting how they all slot in.
I don't know that will eventuate. That's what they're saying in the media.
Yeah.
I think we can lock in Collins and Miles
and Homsch.
And Homsch for sure.
So that's 3. Add in Burgess and Lukosius, there's 5.
Yeah, and then Murdoch seems to us that we believe that he'll be playing. It's whether or not George Holland-Smith creeps onto that bench. I'm thinking Nick Holman creeps onto the bench. That's my smoky.
Despite not having any match fitness into him and being injured for most of the pre-season.
Yeah, that's true. But the thing is, he never left. He trained every session. He was just managed. So he didn't do any heavy contact or anything like that. But he's been cleared for selection. So to me, that just says you've got a bull, and sometimes you stick him in the side paddock, and then when you really need him, not that we need Nick Holman for that same job, but you know what I mean. If we need someone to go charging into packs and make tackles and get clearances and tag players, and we need him. If he's not selected, I won't be too bothered really. But if he is selected, I won't be surprised one little bit.
Yeah. Well, going over our best 22, I can't see it changing too much. Like we said, Lukosius has to find a way in there, and that's probably at the expense of Day. And you seem to think Holman gets a spot in there. Whose expense? Achi or Joyce? We haven't even got George Holland-Smith in that side.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought that the starting team gets tinkered with too much, but I would suspect that Kalachi is vulnerable because he had a really good practice game against Brisbane and then just didn't have good games in the other two JLT. What did you think?
Yeah, I was really looking forward to seeing Kalachi play in those practice games, but I barely noticed him. He had a couple of good passages to play. You know, you noticed that he was playing off half back and not the role he was playing in that Brisbane game. So it's interesting to see that.
I mean, you're quite right. I mean, if the back line is deemed to be maybe a bit too small, then you might take Joyce out and put someone else back there. But sometimes continuity is a really important thing. So Joyce, Harbrow, and Hanley are the guys who've been training together for a couple of seasons now, and Harbrow and Joyce for even longer. And so you think they're the stalwarts. So messing with that, you know. And then while I say that, it's great to see Hanley back in and in form because he did play quite well in the JLT eventually. So you know, the question is, we like Murdoch for the back line. We liked him in the JLT one. Do the coaches like somebody else there? Perhaps Charles Ballard. Is he going to play at all after his howlers, or has he done enough to impress? We'll see.
I think Ballard's done enough to impress. Despite his howlers, he still had a ripper of a game, and he's just shown a lot of maturity to be able to get the intercept marks and get into the right positions. And I think that's what Stewart Dew and the coaching staff would be most happy with, is his footy IQ. Especially with the lack of runners now in games, you need someone that knows how to get into that hole and fill up. You know, it's going to be interesting. I do think we will need experience in the side, so I think George Hall-Smith, if he's available, will have to find a way in there. And that's, let's face it, that's going to be at the expense of a young kid or a kid a couple of years in the system that looks like he's got real potential. Because it's really hard to pick this side. Like, I've been struggled with it myself. It's a really tough decision, and I do not envy the selection committee.
Can I put you on the spot? Who is the youngest player in our selected 22?
Looking over it, I would have to say Ainsworth.
It's a trick question. It's Charlie Ballard, but then after Ballard, Ainsworth and Lukosius is the one who's coming into the side, so he wasn't included. Ainsworth and Bowes 21, so Ballard's the youngest player
at 20.
And he might be, for that reason, he might be the one who's told to sit this one out if they want to go in with mature players like Hall and Smith and Murdoch. But we don't know. It's impossible to tell. I trust them. I really do, because they've put together a terrific team. For the same reason that I'm not too worried that Will Brody's doesn't seem to be in calculations. And Jacob Dawson, Jacob Heron, they were guys who were in the team last year. Ben King doesn't seem to be getting much love. Will Powell's been bloody amazing. So, you know, any of those guys could get named and we won't know why or any of that. So we'll have to see.
That's probably one thing. I wish the club would be a bit more transparent over some of these things, explaining why Day and Brody haven't been playing any of the JLT or anything. But anyway,
it doesn't help when the rumour mill goes around. But I guess it's a sign of our club going into its 9th season that we now have enough players who care. Enough fans who care enough to get on social media and say, you know, why isn't my favourite player playing in the pre-season, and does anyone know if there's any of this conspiracy going on and la la la. I mean, you know, we know that, you know, the truth will come out. I think basically once we get this first game out of the way, and then we start to talk about selections and who went well and who didn't go so well and all that kind of thing, I think that's when it'll come out, you know, just how close Sam Day is or was to getting into the team, and what's the strategy? You know, was the strategy always to stick Lukosius in from the get-go because he is such a high draft pick, and we just need him to play his guts out, and if we can get 22 games into him in the first season, his progression is going to be that much more advanced 5 years down the track than, say, someone like Brody, who's played 11 out of 44 potential games.
Yeah, it's a cause for concern, but you know, like you said, we've got to trust the match committee, and we'll see what they come up with. All right, well, we're down to the 5-minute warning on the episode. So let's go through our predictions. Let's start with what we think the result will be for the... Actually, let's start with who we think will come into the side to play their first game.
Yeah, good one. Well, we know Burgess and Lukosius. That's been given up. I'm gonna just put it out there and say Anthony Miles for mine was locked in that starting spot the day he signed his contract. He's a quality player. You said comparable to Jared Lyons. I've looked at his stats and looked at the way he plays, and yeah, you're absolutely right. They are comparable. They make a similar amount of clearances, similar amount of tackles. Lyons maybe a little bit bigger. If Lyons has an edge in any areas whatsoever, the one significant difference is that Miles has good disposal, and that is going to make a huge difference. There's at least 10% difference between the two players, which, you know, that's 1 in 10 kicks. Well, if 1 in 10 kicks is a forward 50 entry and finding a target, then those guys have 15 to 20 kicks a game. Miles could be a match winner for us in comparison.
Yeah, definitely. I'd like to add to what you said about Collins and Homp should be in the side. That's pretty much a foregone conclusion. Let's move on to who we think will win or what margin. I said I picked the Suns by about 5 goals, so 30 points. And yourself?
Yeah, well, look, I think the first 2 practice matches, the Suns got out to a really good lead, and then the Swans got the first 4 goals. So I think we have the right idea of trying to start with the right thing, and if we can get that start on, I think we can win it by 6 goals. Still be 6, but 13th instead of 17th.
Yep, I agree. Bottom 6, I think it will be the higher end. So, yeah, I'd say 14, 13, around that. Now, best and fairest winner for the Suns?
Jack Martin.
Oh, okay. I've gone for Hanley. I think Hanley's run out of half back would be instrumental for us. I think that's the way we're going to be playing this year, having relying on winning the ball back off that half back flank. Okay, and leading goal scorer for the year?
Not Alex Sexton, although I think he's already our leading goal kicker. No, Peter Wright. It's his year. This is his year to shine. He could be as good as anyone at the position. He'll be going for a Coleman this year.
Yeah, I did want to say one of our big men as well, but the big man I was going to say was Sam Day. Purely because I think he's due for it, and I think getting the second or third best defender would help him, and I thought Wright would be running up the ground a bit more. But considering Day's not in round 1 side, or doesn't look to be, I'm going to go and say Burgess.
Big call, and I think you're onto something there.
And finally, recruit of the year. If I'm saying Burgess is going to be our leading goal scorer, I've probably got to stick with him as being our recruit of the year. What do you think?
Well, I mean, draft player or trade or free agency or all of the above.
Any new player for the Suns.
Jack Homsch.
Jack Homsch. All right, well, there you go. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the GC Sunscast. Go Suns, Tom.
Hey, go Suns. See you next week.
See ya.